Okay, why don't we get started? It looks like a good portion of the folks who registered have already joined. About 3/4 actually. So yeah, let's get started. So welcome everyone. We're really glad you came to talk with us about Newmarket's tax credits and affordable for sale housing. Just a few little things. Housekeeping, I would say. So today you're going to be hearing from Jill Gilbert, who's our General Counsel and Vice President, Howard Smith, our founder and the brains behind the thing, let's put it that way, and me, Donna Smith, co-founder, Executive Vice President, and then Jeanette Reynolds will be running everything for us and keeping us on track and helping you out as needed. Just a few housekeeping things. If you have questions while, during a specific section, if you want to put them in the Q&A so we can track them, and somebody who isn't speaking at the time will try and track them, and if appropriate, we'll sneak them in and ask the question at the time. If not, we'll make sure to get to questions at the end of each segment. There will be basically 3 of them, and then a Q&A at the end as well. And feel free to, put those questions in when they come up so that if they're timely, we can try and reach them as we're talking about things generally. We're hoping that this can be conversational and not just a lecture. So let's get started. And I guess the first thing we want to talk about is a little bit of the why, in terms of why is affordable homeownership so important. Sorry. I just noticed that it switched me to a different language, to Italian, and something came up. So I'm switching back to English, and hopefully nobody missed anything. And now we'll continue in English about the why of affordable homeownership. And so one of the things we want to talk about is, I think everyone knows, everyone on this Zoom, and really everyone nowadays understands how severe the housing crisis, and particularly the affordable housing crisis, is in our country. And in addition to that, there is not enough affordable housing stock, and not enough housing stock to literally house the people who need homes. And when you add on top of that the fact that the home is the largest asset of most families, and in particular of low-income families and people of color, in order to address housing and wealth inequities, we really have to address affordable home ownership. And I think it's a good time now, because we know that the government is very aware of it. They have the NHIA and they're supporting it. They are putting other things in place to try and address affordable home ownership issues, and to see if we can get more housing like we need it, and affordable quality housing stock that can help create homes and assets for families and can just totally transform communities. One of the best tools that seems to be a well-kept secret still in order to support affordable homeownership development is using Newmarket's tax credits for it. And yet, to date, as of the 76 billion that was deployed through 2022, less than 2% of that went to affordable for sale housing development. We'd like to change that. We will, and one of the things I'd say too is that the CDFI fund in all the conferences has made clear that it considers affordable home ownership an important outcome, as important as any other outcome. During the presentation, we're also going to talk about our history of using Newmarkets for affordable for sale housing, and walk you through the model that we use, and show you the differences between our model and the sort of typical Newmarket's tax credit model. And then talk about how important it is to expand the use of it for sale housing. So I would say, let's talk just a little bit more in depth about the need for it. So one of the things we want to talk about is the high interest rates and the high housing prices that have really, really exponentially increased from like 2021 through today, have really priced so many people who previously could have gotten a starter home out of the market. And in order to address that affordability gap, you need a very flexible and strong subsidy, and New Markets Tax Credits provides that. So you can see, if you look at these numbers, the difference in interest rates of, 4.2 a year later, 6.5% in March of 2023. You look at the median home price, the purchase dollars are really high. I mean, to think that a median purchase price is $375,000 for families earning, poverty rate or even 100% AMI, that's not affordable, especially when you look at the down payment costs and the closing costs that many families cannot put together, and then the mortgage payment themselves. If you look at the annual income required, $117,000, that is not an average income for most families, and certainly not low-income families. And then we have to face this. We have to look at this head on, and this needs to be obviously a critical piece of what we're doing, what we're addressing, and why we're doing this. And you can see that the access to home ownership among white, Black, Hispanic, Asian populations is drastically different. I mean, you see that the purple line up there, between 70 and 75% for the most part. And then you go down and you look at the red line, which is for our Black population, and it's under 45% the majority of the time, recently especially. So clearly this disparity is critical. And what it does is, as I said before, homeownership really is the key asset to building wealth. It is the key way that families can address issues like having something to use to support higher education for their kids. So having a little cushion to use in an emergency, a medical emergency, an asset that they can continue to grow, that they can sell if they want to. And without that, oftentimes wealth inequity does not improve. It's critical that we look at what homeownership does. So on the personal side, for families, they become more engaged in their neighborhoods because they're stable, they're in a place for a long time. They have an asset that they bought and they are building, and that they are proud of. Homes are in better condition when it's a homeowner in it versus a renter. They're more politically involved, locally involved, neighborhood involved, have oftentimes more involved in their children's schooling, which leads to better education outcomes for their children. It also provides them with more stable monthly costs, because rents are very variable, and therefore it's hard for folks to plan for that. With a mortgage, you know what your mortgage amount is, you plan for it. And when you're in a New Markets Tax Credit subsidized development or home, that price is going to be affordable, because the folks we work with and the QALICBs who do this work make sure that it's an affordable price. And because a household is spending less than 30% of their income on their housing, they have funds for medical expenses, utilities, extras for kids, education, healthy food. It gives them such a boost and such an ability to live a quality life. There's also boost to the economy. One thing is, businesses don't move to a place where there isn't housing for their workers. Workforce housing is critical, and homeownership is one of the best ways to provide that. There are companies now looking to actually fund affordable housing in the areas that they want to go put their plant or their business in. Construction and sale of homes also brings funding to the communities in which they live through permitting fees, other costs, and then it brings tax funding to communities because oftentimes it's these new homes are replacing vacant property that wasn't generating any tax revenue for the community. And of course, the increased wealth on the part of the family means that they are spending more in their community as well. And now that I've hopefully convinced you that homeownership is critically important, I'm going to turn it over to Howard for him to talk a little bit about the history of the use of new markets for affordable for sale housing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Excuse me. Thanks everybody for coming today. I guess I'll start by saying I am a recovering attorney. I met Donna, my wife and business partner, in law school. She says she's recovered, and Jill knows she's not allowed to recover. But we've all worn our attorney's hats while we've been trying to develop and evolve the new markets tool that we use for home ownership. And I thought I'd just give you a little background about how we got started. It's pretty organic, and it does explain the madness behind the passion that we have for home ownership. So when I was practicing as an attorney, I became friends with a couple of guys who started doing business development for U.S. banks, CDC, Zach Boyers and Mark Hirschman. And in fact, Mark Hirschman has a passion for home ownership the same as we do, and had volunteered for a couple of habitats around the country. And when I'm involved with our habitat here in St. Louis, and so I asked Mark if he would get involved, and he co-chaired a blitz build with us in an area called Wellston. Sort of looks like what you're seeing on the screen right now, in one of our distressed communities, and eventually he steered me to use new markets to build a pilot plant and distribution center for a national design builder that I was working for at the time. And when we're doing that, it was an equity transaction too. It was the last equity transaction I ever did. But while we're doing it, we thought this could be the first federal affordable housing tax credit. So we've jumped on the plane, flew down to the mothership habitat, pitched the idea to them, said Donna would get them an allocation. And so came back and said to Donna, hey, we're going to be able to work together for the first time. And all you need to do is to get some tax credits for habitat. And she said, what kind of tax credits? What are they? And then that was around 16, 17 years ago. And Donna's a great writer. In her first attempt, she got an allocation of $25 million that was only available for deployment in the GO zone. This was back in 2007. In 2008, we deployed it all within 5 Habitat for Humanity affiliates in the GO zone in one transaction. And that turned out to be somewhat of a prediction, because we found that there was benefits to combining more than one quality B, or having more than one quality B in a transaction. And that's typically how we continue to ramp up what we call the new markets for a home ownership program. So since that time, Jeanette, let's go to the next one. We've done 622 million of new markets transactions just for home ownership. We've exited a bunch of them, all successfully. that turns into almost 140 CDEs and over 5,500 homes in over 32 states in the District of Columbia. And we have worked with 23 CDEs who wanted to be able to offer home ownership in addition to the other sorts of deployment that they were making in their communities. So this is our builds map and shows just how many deals that we've done. It's on our website. Feel free to tune into it. This is just an example of 2 transactions that we closed for our Housing Channel, which is a member organization of Housing Partnership Network. And Housing Partnership Network, Habitat for Humanity International, who we don't manage their CDE for any longer, but whom we support in their efforts to get new markets just for home ownership, as well as Community Housing Capital, one of the financing arms of NeighborWorks America, who has a housing only focus in the allocation that they get. So these 3 organizations, HFHI, Habitat, Housing Partnership Network, and CHC, receive homeownership only allocations. We think that's important to highlight, just so that we can underscore that the CDFI's intention that impacts and outcomes can and should include home ownership opportunities within the CDE's tools of available community development options. Here are the 23 CDEs that we've worked with outside of having new markets only transactions. We've recently been really thankful that there's a handful that have recently wanted to change their focus to address the needs of the communities that they serve, and understandably have been concerned about getting dinged with respect to their business strategy and what has been successful for them in the past. And so we worked a lot with the late Bob Ibanez, who became a good friend of ours, to help us develop a process that many of these CDEs have done in order to feel comfortable moving forward with housing. And either stems from, it's a simple process, but it makes sense, and we found that it doesn't result in any negative or other adverse reviews of an application. So in the end, we've been able to continually evolve our program and welcome new CDEs into the program, and hopefully you'll see the benefit of that today when we go into the model and explain it to you and work through any questions you have. So next slide, I think. So we're back at the key components to here. I want to just tell you what the secret sauce is right off the bat, so that we can then dive into the model and we can have a context. And it's my personal theory, and I won't dwell on this too long, but that when LIHTC developers came over to Habitat and they saw that, you know, the prudent loan and a leverage model is going to be having a deed of trust or mortgage at the project level that has to be released on a per parcel basis when you sell a home, that was going to trigger a redeployment of those tax credits. So we all put our heads together and figured out a way where a not-for-profit as the QALICB is able to, under tax law, be acknowledged as having other collateral available to secure obligations. And as a result, we changed the whole concept of a home builder into a home enterprise manufacturer. So that think of it as a manufacturer who's just building big widgets that happen to be houses. And so as a result, the collateral package follows that enterprise C&I loan type of lending and does not drop to the project level, thus eliminating collateral at that level, and also resulting in benefits that Jill will tell you about with respect to source lenders. The second is, how do we keep the QALICB active? Well, what we do is, since we work mostly with not-for-profits whose focus is to build for sale affordable housing, they're already in the business of doing that. So that is not a heavy lift for them to find a qualified census tract in their operating community close to the existing project that can suffice to be to fill that active component. And then finally, the most important part of this, and that one that we're proud to say Jill was really one of the architects of, is paying off that source lender as soon as the house is sold. And that's so important because, as we know, the source lender isn't going to be able to have the collateral that a normal home builder lender on a land acquisition and development loan would have, which is, as we said, a mortgage or a deed of trust that burns off every time there's a parcel. So Jill will talk about how that has occurred, and the benefits and the source lenders what kind of issues they have, if any, and the success that we've had, they've had and we've had. So thanks again. I'll be back, and I'll turn it over to Jill.
And I will say we do have a question, and I think it'll probably make sense to answer it as we go through this process next, which is, would this model work with for-profit developers and QALICBs?
And the answer to that is yes, except we don't, with QALICBs, it's more problematic, but it's a standard structural convenience that we've employed for QALICBs in their market to employ for-profit sub-developers who have a better handle on their submarkets than they do. We've had success with very good QALICBs who have been back for more allocation. We have found that for-profit QALICBs really restrict as much net benefit to get down to the bottom line. And there's also other problematic features with it that arise from the collateral and the objectives of the CDE, who want to see the full deployment of their credits in this most impactful way, to the natural and reasonable desire of a for-profit developer who wants to maximize their profit, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we have found that a not-for-profit hiring a for-profit developer provides the best symbiotic relationship. Jill?
Thanks, Howard. Thanks everybody, just real quickly, for joining. It's so great to see people we've worked with, many times before, people that we've talked to but haven't actually that haven't done homeownership yet, and ones that we haven't even talked to. So it's really great to see the interest in this, because we think it is such an important it renders such an important impact. And we think the best way really to show that impact and the benefits of the program is to go through the model. And we know that's what CDEs want to do anyway. So this is a diagram. And the best way to do that really is to look at a transaction that just recently closed. So this transaction closed along with all of you for the deadline in March. So it just closed last month. So these are real numbers. These are real projects. These are real homes and real benefits and real homeowners who are going to be moving into these homes based on this project. So this was the transaction. As I said, it closed last month. It was with Community Housing Capital's allocation, the CDE that we help manage the allocation. It involved 4 different NeighborWorks members because their allocation is used just for NeighborWorks members. And as you can see, if you look at on the left-hand side, the rectangle that starts with non-portion of the business will kind of start there. I mean, the project really starts, or the deal, as you know, really starts with getting the leverage together. So when there's source lenders involved, that's kind of where that really starts. So even if you go down below that non-portion of the business, that's kind of where the source is, the capital starting to be stacked. The source lender is involved if there is a source lender. And as Howard said, in the very first transaction that we did, that involved, aggregating QALICBs to try and get as much net benefit down to them as possible. And that's something that we have continued to do. So here we had 4 NeighborWorks organizations. They all assembled their leverage in a variety of ways. They all had a source loan. They all had cash. They all had the 24-month previously incurred costs. So in this deal, as in all of our deals, they come to that leverage lender with their own mix of those 3. And they're able, when they do have a source loan, in this case, all the source loans were provided by CHC because they do that as well. But we've had other deals where, there are 4 or 5 different QALICBs and there are 4 different source lenders. But so obviously they're all members of that leverage lender. They don't necessarily know each other. They may know each other through the industry, but they don't know their projects in any detail, and they don't have to. They touched the new markets transaction because they're all members of that leverage lender. They're all receiving this allocation, and you can see the amounts that are there. So it's just based on the allocation that was right for their project. That shows in the leverage lender box the amount of leverage they had to bring that was accumulated through costs, a source loan, and the 24-month costs. And so as in new markets transactions, that amount gets lent to the investment fund. And that's similar to what I think most everybody here is kind of used to. The thing that's important, and that's, I think, is one of the hallmarks of this model, is that everything is siloed for these projects. So you'll see after the funds are loaned to the investment fund and they're combined with the tax credit equity, those 4 QEIs are made there in kind of the middle of the page. And that's super important to the model because everything is siloed, so that if something happens with one of the projects, compliance or otherwise, and we, thank goodness, haven't had anything major like that happen, but it won't impact what's going on with the other projects. And it also allows us additional flexibility when you get down to the different loans. So the QALICBs also are all separate. They're separate documents, separate borrower, obviously, that's involved. And that does lend to flexibility as well. Like in this transaction, we had 3 of the projects that were qualifying through qualified census tracts and 1 that was using targeted populations. And so we were able to combine all of that in one transaction. So as kind of it follows the model, the standard new markets model, you've got the QALICBs that are being made from the sub CDE to the QALICBs. It's really important that we point out that we use the portion of the business in these transactions. That allows, especially with the nonprofits, as Howard mentioned, we've got nonprofits as the QALICBs. It allows them, it's one less place where they have to, form an additional entity. There's no SPE that's involved. And it also allows flexibility with the source lender because you've got the borrower that is basically the non-portion that's the borrower on that source loan. But so you've got the portion of the business that's just that. For those of you who may not know that, it's just a separate kind of accounting department through which all of the costs and all of the revenue associated with their particular project runs through that portion of the business. And so the QALICB box there that you see, that shows the amount of the source loan, or the amount of the QALICB, and then the amount of the funds that each project had to spend based on the costs that they're sharing and the reserves that are set aside. And so, they'll get those funds on the day of the new markets closing. They're in the homeownership model. There's not formal dispersing. They receive those funds. They're able to spend those funds as they've always been doing. on their homes. And then there is an accounting, the following month, basically, for what they've spent in the prior month. And when we're involved in a transaction, we spend that time going through all of that because we provide the recapture guarantee. And so it's important that we follow that spend, we follow the other compliance for 7 years. But so the QALICBs will have those funds to spend. They'll spend those funds within 12 to 18 months. They'll build their homes. And when the homes are sold, those sale proceeds will come back to that POB. And then that's when they can be distributed, because those are no longer QALICB proceeds. Those are home sale proceeds. And so they come back to the POB, and then they are distributed out to the non-portion of the QALICB or of the nonprofit. And that's when, as Howard was alluding to, they can be used. And this was something that we really worked with Reinvestment Fund in one of the first deals when they were a source lender. And so we appreciate their help with that. Those funds then are used to pay down the source loan if there is a source loan, or they're able to be used for building additional homes, for other operating expenses of the nonprofit. They can really be used for anything that the nonprofit needs. And that's a really important point of the structure as well, because I think a lot of people think that those home sale proceeds have to be reinvested into additional homes, have to be held for 7 years. That there's something that they are tied to this program for 7 years and can't get out of the structure. And that's not how, this model works at all. And that's one of the huge benefits of this model, is that that developers are able to get those funds, they're able to use them to pay down that loan. And we've seen anywhere from 1 year to 3 years for the most part in getting those source loans paid. And then they're able to do other things with them if they don't have a source loan, or once that source loan is paid off. So they can use it for other homes to build additional homes, but they don't have to. But in any event, it helps just foster their operations and all that they are doing in these communities. And as Donna kind of said earlier, all of these organizations that we work with are so tied to their communities, and really know what's needed in their communities. And so they're able to use this program to really get to the next level in their own organizations with their communities, because they can determine, how to use that net benefit. And that's, if you look down at the bottom left-hand corner, the net benefits listed there for this transaction. And, we're able to see, by combining the organizations or the QALICBs, we're able to see net benefits anywhere from, 20 to honestly 30% over the amount of the leverage that each one is bringing. And they're able to use that net benefit in any way that they see fit with the homes that they're building. So if there's some homes or if they're rehabbing homes and there's some that require a greater subsidy, they don't have to use that net benefit proportionately across all of the homes that they're building. They're able to use it as they really determine is needed in, connection with that. They can also use it to help, be able to offer a more affordable, home price to the home buyer, and meet that at least 20% that have to be sold to, low-income home buyers. But they really have that flexibility. And that's why I think they really like this program, the developers, because they know that it's a flexible program. We currently have, in excess of 100, projects that are looking for allocation. So once a project, once a developer closes one of these projects, they really are ready to do their next one. We have some who go through this, as it's an elongated, or can be an elongated, for them, at least quick for us, I think, as far as a closing process, but, they're ready to close another one as soon as they close this one. So it's something that we have seen and have heard testimonials from all the nonprofit developers who are involved that really have seen the benefits of this in their communities and within their organizations. And it's, as Donna said, it's I think a little bit of a secret within the industry that, that it can provide these impacts, and that so many CDEs really have used it already. And we hope that, that trend will continue.
Hey, Jill,
Here's
there's some
Oh, go ahead,
question.
Donna.
Sure,
There's, I thought maybe I could interrupt you with some questions.
sure.
Do the QLICs need to be spent in 12 to 18 months? And how is NQFP tested? So first, do the QLICs need to be spent in 12 to 18 months?
Yes, well, yes, yes, that's, that's something that we follow very closely as we are going through the whole process. When we're involved in a transaction, we get that spend on a monthly basis. We track it as far as what they need to spend, what they think they're going to spend, what they have spent. We'll have, monthly calls with them at a certain point going through that spend. And so that's one thing that we will work with, the nonprofit developers on the front end, understanding really what their project, what the issues might be with their project, and making sure they understand that. So yes.
And then how is NQFP tested?
The NQFP, as far as in connection with the home sale proceeds, I'm guessing maybe that's where it's coming from, that are brought back into the POB.
So I'm not sure, because the question just says, how is
Well,
NQFP tested?
that's normally where I think we've seen
Yeah.
that issue come up, is that there's a concern. So when the funds come back into the POB, so a home is sold,
Yeah.
those sale proceeds, and our finance directors work very closely with the QALICBs to make sure those home sale proceeds come back to the POB. And then since there is that prohibition, and it's in the operating agreement, which gets attached to the loan agreement, there's a prohibition in the operating policy against the accumulation of non-qualified financial property. And so then based on that, the home sale proceeds basically are distributed to the non-POB. And so then once they're out of the non-POB, then there's obviously no NQFP issue at that point. And so then they can be used, as we were saying before, to, pay down a source loan or use for any other operational expenses or any kind of cost that the nonprofit has. I don't know if that's responsive. If there's more background, anybody wants to put in the chat or in the Q&A, sorry, on that question, we can certainly talk about it in more depth.
Okay, and actually Ross Hoffman was the person who asked the question, and now we see his box there.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see if there's more. There is another question, if you don't mind me just reading it to you. The question is, what are the 80-20 implications in the structure? And I'm assuming that has to do with the 20% affordable homes sold affordably to low income persons. Sorry, there we go. I don't know if you want to talk about it just generally or.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we also track as well. All of the developers have to sell at least 20% of their homes to low-income home buyers. In this instance where we had one that was qualifying through targeted populations, that amount was higher. But we track that as far as the home sales. The developers know that that's a requirement, and it's something that our compliance department follows as well.
We found that CDEs like to see more than 20%, and in fact, the average of our not-for-profit developers is much higher than that, isn't it? It's closer to 80. Is that right, Jill?
Yeah, I think you could say that across the board. If you looked at all of of all of the transactions that we've closed, it definitely is much higher than that, because a lot of these developers, that's what they do, is they sell majority of their homes or all of their homes to low-income home buyers.
That being said, though, oh, sorry, Donna.
No, I was going to say that actually the higher percentage to a large extent has to do with the fact that the business model of most of the QALICBs that we work with and that our CDEs work with, that's their mission and their focus anyway. So even though some use mixed income development as a means to addressing the needs of specific communities, and ensuring mixed income neighborhoods, they also often do well over 20% affordable.
Oh, and then the question, I see another question there. Does that apply to the homes that are sold through the compliance period? So thank you very much, Tabitha, for also raising that good point. Because that is, as Howard said, that's how the home, how the QALICB remains active, or how the POB remains active, is that there is at least one home in each of the compliance years that's either rehabbed or constructed, and best efforts are made to sell that. That is in a targeted populations transaction that would have to be sold to a low-income home buyer. But in a qualified census tract transaction, it does not necessarily have to. But as Donna said, a lot of the nonprofit developers we work with, that is their model. So it would be sold to a low-income home buyer in any event, but it's not required.
And Nancy, our finance director, she made a great point in the chat that you want to talk about how we get the fees outside the structure for the compliance period, so it doesn't count.
Oh, for the NQFP, right?
Reserved, yeah.
Yeah, that is a great point. So all of the fees are reserved up front in these transactions. So the idea is that we don't want the nonprofit developers have to come out of pocket on anything in this transaction. So we always require that the CDE fees, our fees, the audit and tax fees, we also usually include, or always include, a miscellaneous amount, just in case there is something that happens during the compliance period. But all of those are paid from the POB to the non-POB. So that's another way that we don't run afoul of the NQFP issues. So those funds are held in a reserve account that is owned by the non-POB. And those are monitored by Nancy and our other finance director, Leanne. And when fees are due, they're paid out of that account. But that's one important component of the program as well.
I would like to mention before we go on to any other Q&A, and I don't think this is very public, but we've been working with Freddie Mac for the past year and a half after they contacted us, because they would like to come into the new markets world to invest in new markets for homeownership. And we've gotten past the first stage at Freddie Mac, where the leadership has enabled the folks who are handling this initiative to now make the ask to FHFA, their mothership, to come into the market, hopefully within the next year, to stand up a pilot investment for one of the for a large allocation of NMTCs for homeownership. So were there other questions?
I think, Howard, we were going to briefly talk about next steps in terms of using your 15% carve out and then putting it in your application. We might want to touch on that.
Great. So Donna, that would be, you're the best at that if you want to talk about that.
Okay, just really briefly, and then as Howard said, we'll open it up to questions, and I'm sure you've all figured out I talk pretty fast anyway. Really just two things to sort of touch on. If you have not used homeownership before, and used your new markets for homeownership before, or don't have a track record of funding affordable homeownership projects in your other lending, since you have the 15% carve out of your sub-all carve out, the 85% sub-all requirement, you could use all or a portion of your 15% carve out in 1 year and support an affordable homeownership project or more, depending on how much that 15% is. Once you do that, then in the next year's application, you have that track record to talk about, because that would be part of your table B1 lending. And once you do that, then you select how, then the rest, I'm sure you've got it, right? You select housing units as one of your outcomes. You can then talk about that homeownership track record. You're going to have at least one strong homeownership project in your priority pipeline, and you can talk about that. And really and I have walked several CDEs through that, and they have since done that successfully. So I'm happy to talk to folks about it, work with them. I've read the responses relating to that before and made some tweaks to them, because we just want this used for homeownership more and more and more, because it's such a flexible and really important tool for the developers we work with. And now I will go back to opening it up, as Howard said, to questions.
And
There
we
was an earlier question that I know we talked about internally just to respond to, as far as transactions, in the example of only a single QALICB, how those are different.
Sure, I
Rush-
mean, they, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was gonna say, go ahead, Jill.
They follow the same type of formula or the same type of structure, except with the leverage lender. What we've seen is that as long as there's 5% differentiation between the leverage lender and the QALICB, so sometimes we have a single nonprofit developer who has some sort of natural relationship with a nonprofit, and so they would join together in that leverage lender. Or more frequently now, we've seen, supporting organizations that get formed, and that then is the entity that serves as the leverage lender. And I think that seems to be a much more common thing recently. Because a single QALICB isn't able to share transaction costs with other parties, the net benefit, percent is going to be a little bit lower. We often, we had a transaction last year where we had 2 single transactions that were closing around the same time, and they were able to utilize the same leverage lender. We try and be as creative as possible. And just try, and we're always looking out for ways like that where we can keep the transaction costs low, but in some cases it's just a single supporting organization as the leverage lender and a single QALICB, and it works just fine.
And our because we continue to try and work with the same professionals that we've worked with for the past 15 years on these transactions, Jill is able to hold down the costs to very respectable figures, and even for multi-QALICB transactions, we're able to get our total transaction costs to be approximately 300,000, maybe a little bit more, on an average transaction with the same type of moderate problems that would naturally spring up in any potential home transaction. So we're very proud of the fact that we work with a team of professionals that continue to work with us to push as much net benefit down to the bottom line as possible.
And I would say we've been able to do that because we have worked with great professionals, and we've worked, historically with, an investor that, we started off with. We're starting to work with other investors as well. And, really have been, it's this, the professionals that we've been able to work with in all of these transactions have been really great to work with and have helped us. And I think we're all kind of working to the same, end of trying to get as much net benefit down to the QALICBs as possible.
Yep.
Well, we really appreciate your time. We wanted to be respectful of the amount of time that we set aside to convey the information and to seek any questions. And if there are any that we're fine to continue to stay and to answer them, but if not, that really concludes our presentation, and really appreciate you attending, and would love to answer any other questions you might have in the future.
Well, and we do have, oh, go on.
Oh, no, that was it. I was just going to say there is another question in the Q&A box.
Oh, sorry, please.
Which is possibly existential. How can we help increase allocation for housing?
I think, Anne, that's a great way to kind of, round things up and things, we'd love for more CDEs to be involved in this. We'd love for, the CDFI fund to do certain things. And I know there's a lot of activity on that front, and Donna, you're involved in that quite a bit. So I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, we have several suggestions. One of the groups we work with is the Homeownership Alliance that NCST runs, and they have a New Markets Tax Credit for Affordable Homeownership Working Group, and we're involved with that. And they're working on a letter actually to the CDFI fund about both sort of administrative level, so CDFI fund level tweaks that could be made to the application that might help us attract more CDEs and investors to affordable home ownership. And then also there's some legislative, requests that we have out there as well. And we're happy to talk to folks about that in more detail and to really get nerdy about it. If anyone would like to talk about it, happy to do so.
Donna will nerd out with you.
Yeah. Yeah. A link to the website for the working group. It's through NCST and it's their Home Ownership Alliance, Ross. I can find your contact info, I'm sure, because we have our list. And I'll look and maybe I'll just connect you to Jenny who runs it for NCST. That might be the easiest way for you to learn whatever you want to learn about it. Oh, thanks,
yes.
Beth. Okay, there's the link. Thank you.
Ask and you shall receive.
That's right, and I didn't even ask.
See
Thanks,
what
Beth.
this great group of people can accomplish
I know.
together.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate it, and we hope to hear from some of you.
And
Or
feel
all-
free to reach out to us at any time with any questions. We are always available.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.